Welcome to Multimaps. My name is Nelson. On this channel you'll get a peek behind the scenes as to what goes into running a paintball, airsoft, and laser tag field. So if you've ever been curious as to what goes on behind the scenes at a small business like this, or you're actually considering starting your own action tag field, either indoors or outdoors, you know what to do. Hit all those buttons, or just memorize the name of the channel and search frequently for new content. That's probably what I do. So 2020 will be the beginning of our 23rd season of operation up here in Canada, and we're located just outside the city of Saskatoon, which has a population of about 275,000. We've built two fields to handle peak demand. You're looking at the safe zone in the more developed field of the two. In it, we've got a large sniper tower, and we've hauled in a bunch of city buses over the years. Here's a mock helicopter we made. We call it the Scrap Hawk. It's made from an old oil tank and the frame off a square bale wagon. We've got a ton of these garbage cans, well over 1,000, and we've done a certain amount of earthwork here and there between the two fields as well. So most of our time over the years has gone into things other than the physical playing field though, little innovations that would save us time in the day-to-day work of looking after groups, or gimmicks that would hopefully give clients a better time. So we'll talk about those things as well as some of the basics like what guns we've found to be the most reliable, single lens masks versus thermals, and so on. But before we go over those things, I think it's necessary in this episode to lay the foundation for what's to come on this channel, to go right back to the beginning, before any of this stuff was here, and not to talk about failure, but to talk about struggle. This is my dad, George. This photo was taken in 1982, and this is him now, in 2020. He's the one who started the paintball field, but he's been an entrepreneur for ages, long before the shooting started. This is just a short list, but he started the Honda motorcycle dealership in his hometown when he was 15. He built an energy-efficient cabin from the foundation up when he was 29. And at 31, he built a shop on the acreage here, which has been central to the paintball innovations we've done over the years. He's also built various toys for my siblings and I, some just for fun, but many with a commercial intent. The most ambitious toy with a commercial intent was what he called the dig rig.
Both needed to effectively pivot. The child's length of reach and his strength are also serious limitations. Our solution has a patent application in process. We use a sliding seat plus the child's weight to raise and lower the primary boom. By altering the steepness of the cam that's mounted beneath the seat, the operator you see is only 3.5 years old. The seat, footbar, and weight control are all set up for a 6-year-old, but he is still doing okay. As to whether children like the toy, testing results show that enthusiasm is high, be it 3.5-year-old boys, 6-year-old girls, or 25-year-old children.
The ultimate goal with the dig rig was to mass produce and sell them, and 30 completed machines were made. This first and only run was very difficult to sell, however. In the course of adapting, he sold plan sets and then prefab kits as well. These sold better, but it was still a pretty niche product, so to try to reach a broader audience, Dad tried advertising in Popular Science. Here's his recollection of that event.
And I'd seen maybe slightly similar ads in the back of Popular Science, but I went whole hog, and I think I bought, I don't know how big it was, but it cost $7,000, one crack. And I thought, well, you know, this will really bring in the orders, but it didn't. I mean, I don't know how many I would have sold, 50, 60 plan sets, you know, maybe at $25 a piece. But the cost of the ad was just dwarfed the inflow. So I think that was getting towards the end of the dream. It was became obvious that, yeah, it just wasn't flying.
After the dig rig, Dad continued to pay the bills freelancing for a couple different shops in town, but he continued inventing things as well, often with an emphasis on sports, particularly hockey, which Evan, my older brother, and I are obsessed with. So fast forward several years, in the hockey season of 97-98, Evan and I were playing on the same rec hockey team. This footage is actually from a few years later, But here's our year-end photo in '98. And when the team voted on what to do as a wrap-up, now I remember being a little bit nervous as to whether we'd actually be able to play that first time. Pacifist beliefs are fairly common historically where my parents grew up. So here's my dad's response when I asked him what he recalled of his feelings on letting us play that first time.
Yeah, good question. There's been so much of it since then. I'm almost vague on it. It's possible I was sort of a little bit uneasy about it too. Just going out and shooting each other.
Right.
And but anyway, we went, and it was a bit of a gong show as far as it being, just sort of crappy organization and right. The way they handed out equipment in the games and so forth. But anyway, that was our first taste of it. So then on the way back, I think that you and Evan my recollection would be that you said, "Hey, Dad, we should have a paintball field." And so I didn't disagree. And we had a bunch of piles of straw from a horse racing track, of course, in the backyard. And so we weren't sure whether we should call it straw meadows or horseshit meadows, but all these big mounds of hay that the garbage trucks had dumped out were just wonderful to run around amongst and hide behind. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that was sort of the beginning of it.
So we knew nothing about the sport though. We weren't paintballers when we began. Dad did his research though. We went around to a bunch of fields locally, and I remember being that kid that fills up their pockets with a bunch of unbroken paint from off the ground. Anyways, Dad decided to go ahead with the scheme, and on the way back from a family camping trip to the mountains, we stopped in Calgary and got 13 pump guns, CO2 tanks, masks, squeegees, etc., and some paint. Our setup was pretty simple the first year though. This is our safe zone in the fall of 1998. Guns, masks, CO2, rental clothing, everything was stored in an old school bus that we purchased that got driven out to the field every event. In the second year, the safe zone was moved to a more central part of the playing field, and we got an old van that we soundproofed and stored a generator in for electricity. The workshop was increasingly coming into play too. Here you can see a light tower that we used to stretch evenings out a little longer in the fall. So everything was mobile at this point still. Nothing had been brought in yet that wasn't on rubber tires. So the incentive to invest was increasing though. Word was getting out. We were doing more groups. People were having a good time. About this point, Evan had started engineering as well, and so we got the request to look after a large group of engineers. This kicked us into gear. We bought a bunch more guns. We improved the safe zone significantly, and we put up a bunch more night lights out in the playing field.
Certainly, the engineering thing I know was that was a major step, and I guess maybe I'd gone so long without seeing income from something. I've been involved in so many money losers that I joked that I'd spent $10 an hour. For every hour I'd worked for the privilege of working. And so actually having some money come back in. And, very early on, we were sort of turning a profit that, we found that we could charge for this. And, we had considerably more money when the day was over than we did at the beginning, right. Which was sort of an unusual experience.
The thing that was holding us back at this point was that we were still running off a generator, but aside from the cost of getting power actually run to the field, technically the acreage still wasn't zoned for commercial use either. So running a business can have a real effect on the environment and the people around you. For example, we would generate way more traffic on a gravel road like this than your typical household would, so it only makes sense that we'd pay a little bit more in taxes to cover that extra maintenance. Now, Dad had looked into the topic of getting proper zoning with the RM even before he got those first guns. Here's his recollection of that first meeting with an RM official.
And so I told him, that we wanted to have this paintball field and, what we had to do as far as getting approval. And so he said to me, don't tell me about it. Don't tell me about it. So he just wanted me to get out of there, and he didn't want to have to deal with it at all. It was sort of irrelevant to him.
Right.
And so that's good. We, I guess we maybe went for close to 4 years, and then we wanted to put in power. And so the dollars were getting too big, and we
Right.
had to get an approval just that, so we couldn't get shut down.
Right.
And I put together a good presentation, and that went super smoothly. They gave her the check mark immediately, and
Okay.
we were bona fide paintball operators.
Now, a couple things that were really fundamental to everything taking off in our 4th year. So once we got people coming, word of mouth was huge. But before that, to really get that critical mass, a yellow page ad was one of the best things that we found to really get people in the door and get the phone ringing. So it actually worked really well. It maybe dates us a bit, but you could just pay the money and you had your clearly defined heading. You're in front of the people you wanted to reach, and you didn't have to fool around with any of these mystery algorithms or fighting for people's attention or search optimization. We were explaining the directions on how to get to the place often, but that was good for public speaking skills. So second point to getting liftoff, and this might sound a little bit woo-woo, but I think I've got a good analogy for how to think about my dad's struggles and business in general. Alright, so think of society as being like a tree. And remember, I just work at a paintball field here, so anyways, the things that will form in a society first will depend on its needs and wants. So you'll have your sub-branch of food and water. It'll form in all the industries related to that. You'll have your branch of clothing and shelter and all the industries related to that. And then you'll have your community branch and everything that grows out of that. So out on your community branch, you'll have your entertainment sub-branch. So you might not have the more complex forms of entertainment we see today, like movies or video games. Instead, you might have stories around the campfire or hide and go seek, but there'll always be something there. So is it just the physical things that we've made that support society and keep us alive? The farms and refineries and factories? I think it's partly those, but I think it's reasonable to extend the analogy further to the things unseen, the roots. So in the analogy, they'd be the character attributes of the people. So I'm going to say that there's knowledge down there supporting society, also morality, and I don't know what you'd call it, but virtues maybe, that were forming in my dad, unseen over the years, that ultimately allowed for this, the paintball field, to form. So I'll let him put that in his own words.
You know, of course, a person makes many things that, well, with the paintball field, you make many things that are kind of weren't good investments, but still, we would have made a tremendous number of things that were good investments that, would have been factors in it being as successful as it's been. And sort of the judgment on, required to have those successes would have been rooted in multiple disasters leading up to to where things actually rolled a bit better. So, whatever. Live and learn.
So a couple virtues I'm going to say that my dad developed over the years were work ethic and perseverance. So just to give an example of that, he made reference to the presentation that he gave to the RM, the one that got us proper zoning.
I put together a good presentation, and that went super smoothly.
So he has a hard copy of all the work that went into that presentation, and there are pages and pages of notes, neighbors that he'd talked to at other fields in the area just to see if they had any noise complaints usually. And then he got aerial survey photos as well, which is basically the old Google Earth, that he used to calculate the distance between all those neighbors and the fields they were beside. All this to serve as support for his case that the RM could make a judgment in our favor and it wouldn't negatively affect anybody around us. So not everybody would have put that much work into that presentation, and he could have been dejected and thought, this is just going to turn out like all the other things that I've undertaken. But he didn't, and I think that there's a lesson in that. So that's my dad's little success story. Story is ongoing. It's quiet here right now. Thanks for watching.